Hello everyone. In today's video, we are going to talk about top 50 Angular interview questions and answers. Myself Mohammad Zubair, and this channel is all about showing you how to become a highly paid IT pro really fast. So without any further ado, let's get started. Number 1. What is Angular? Angular is an open source framework for web development and Google created it. It is used to develop single page applications that run on JavaScript and the front ends. As it is a complete-fledged framework, it takes care of many aspects of front-end web applications such as the layouts, forms, validations, HTTP requests, etc. Number 2. What are different technologies used in Angular? Well, as Angular is a modern front-end framework based on JavaScript, Angular still uses some other technologies to complete and accomplish specific tasks and allow the developers to have a better grip and experience while developing the application with Angular. It uses the TypeScript, a superscript of JavaScript, which means any valid JavaScript is a valid TypeScript. But TypeScript allows us to write JavaScript as a strongly typed language, and we can also define our types, which makes the debugging process easier. Angular also uses the RxJS, and it allows the developers to deal with asynchronous operations in a better way. Number 3. Why was there a need to introduce Angular as the web development was already taking place? Before using a JavaScript-based client-side framework, dynamic websites used to work by taking a template of HTML code with spaces left empty for the data and content feeding in those templates. That data was used to be fetched from the database. After the combination of data and template, the HTML content used to be served to the users. So, this process was a bit complicated and needed a lot of processing. To get rid of these complicated issues and high processing, developers came up with another approach in which only the necessary data used to be sent to render a web page from the server, and then let the JavaScript combine the data with predefined template. Because of this, even mobile phones are now able to have enough power to do this kind of processing. The server just needed to send the data to the client in a recognizable format. It can be JSON, XML, etc. And it drastically improved the performance and reduced the processing. Number 4. What are the building blocks of Angular? Essentially, there are 9 building blocks of Angular applications, and they are as follows: components, data binding, dependency injection, then comes directives, and then comes metadata. At number 6, we have modules. At number 7, we have routing. Number 8 comes with services, and the last one is template. Number 5. What are some of the advantages of using Angular over other technologies? Well, Angular has several advantages, and some of them are as follows. Angular got built by using TypeScript, and because of that, the developers can write strongly typed code that gets transpiled to JavaScript, because strongly typed code is easier to maintain and read, and code is less prone to error. Angular allows the code into separate modules, which can be used to wrap the functionalities related to specific tasks, such as data validation, routing, HTTP communication, etc. Most importantly, Angular has a large ecosystem of libraries, frameworks, tools, plugins, etc., making the development experience for the developer much faster and more enjoyable. It includes Angular CLI, NGRX, RxJS, etc. Number 6. What is TypeScript? TypeScript is known as the superset of JavaScript as it offers excellent consistency. It is also highly recommended as it offers some very good methods and make the code easier and more comfortable to maintain and understand. Ultimately, the code of TypeScript compiles down to JavaScript, which then runs efficiently in any environment. Number 7. What do you mean by filters and elaborate some of them? In Angular and any programming language, the filters gets used to format an expression and then present it to the user. In Angular, we can use them in controllers, view templates or services. Some of the built-in Angular filters are as follows. First of all, I'll talk about date. Well, it helps in the formation of date to a specific format. Then we have filter. It helps in the selection of subset of items from an array. Then comes lowercase. It helps in the formation of string to lowercase. Then we have uppercase. Well, it helps in the formation of strings to uppercase. At last, I'll talk about JSON. It helps in the formation of an object to a JSON string. Number 8. What do you mean by module in Angular? Well, a module can be defined as the logical boundary of an application, encapsulating the code that deals with a specific aspect of our application. Number 9. Explain some of the lifecycle hooks in Angular. In Angular, every component possesses a lifecycle. Angular creates them, renders those components, and then destroys them before removing them from the DOM. This gets achieved by using the lifecycle hooks. Some of them are as follows. ng on init or initiate. Well, it initializes the components. Directive after Angular first displays data-bound properties and sets the components or directives input properties. Then we have ngDoCheck. Well, it detects and acts accordingly on the changes that Angular won't or can't detect on its own. Then comes ngOnDestroy. It cleans up right before the Angular destroys the component or directive. Then comes ng after content init or initialize. It responds after the Angular projects the external content in the components view. At last, I'll talk about ng after content checked. It responds after Angular checks out the control projected in the components. Number 10. What is data binding? Data binding is a process and it is among the most powerful and important feature that helps us establish communication among the DOM and the components. It also makes the defining process of applications simple, as we no longer need to worry and panic about the data pulling or pushing between the template and component. This type of data binding in Angular are as follows: event binding, two-way data binding, property binding, string interpolation. Number 11. Explain string interpolation in Angular. In Angular, string interpolation is also known as the mustache syntax. It only allows one way of data binding. It is a particular type of syntax that uses the double curly braces to make sure to display the component data. Inside the braces comes the JavaScript expression that Angular needs to execute to retrieve the results. And we can further insert them into HTML code. Other than these expressions are regularly stored and updated as part of the digest cycle. Number 12. Explain the differences between Angular and AngularJS. While some of the significant differences between Angular and AngularJS are as follows. First of all, I'll talk about Angular. While Angular uses the components and directives, Angular uses the single braces to bind a property and small braces to bind an event. In Angular, we have support available for module. Angular uses the TypeScript language, which is a support of JavaScript and is typed statistically. Angular supports the hierarchical dependency injection. Along with that, it also supports the unidirectional tree-based change direction. Angular has a simplified architecture, making it easier for professionals to quickly maintain and develop large applications. Now let's talk about AngularJS. AngularJS supports the MVC model. In AngularJS, the professional must use the right and correct directive to bind an event or a property. AngularJS does not offer support for the module, unlike Angular. AngularJS uses JavaScript, which is a dynamically typed language. AngularJS does not support dependency injection. AngularJS is comparatively less manageable. Number 13. Explain some of the differences between Angular expression and JavaScript expression. While both of these expressions are very different from each other, in Angular, we can write the JavaScript code in HTML, which we cannot do in plain JavaScript. Other than that, expressions in Angular are scoped locally. However, in JavaScript, expressions are scoped against the global object. Number 14. What is REST? In Angular, REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It is an API that works on request by HTTP. The request URL points to the data which is to be processed. After that, an HTTP function is used to identify the respective operation that has to be performed on the given data. And the APIs which follows this method is known as RESTful APIs. Number 15. Explain the purpose of the standard module in Angular. The common module available in the Angular package at angular/common is a module that encapsulates every needed feature of Angular. For example, directives, pipes, services, etc. It also has some sub-module as well, like HTTP client module, which is available in the @angular/common/HTTP package. As Angular has a modular approach or nature, the functionalities get stored in a small self-contained modules, and they can be included and imported into projects whenever we need them. Number 16. What do you mean by AOT compilation in Angular? AOT stands for ahead of time. The ahead of time compiler in Angular converts the TypeScript and HTML code into JavaScript during the build phase. That makes the rendering process work faster. There is a need for this compilation process as Angular uses the TypeScript and HTML code. First, the compiler converts the code into JavaScript, which can be effectively used by the browser that runs our applications. Number 17. What are templates in Angular? Templates for Angular get written in HTML, including attributes and elements specific to Angular. Furthermore, the template combines with the data from the controller and model. Then it can be rendered to present and offer the user a dynamic view. Number 18. What are SPAs or single page applications? Single page applications are those web applications that load with newer features and merely adds to the user interface. The application do not load new HTML pages to show the new content to the user on the browser. Instead, these are made dynamically, and this becomes possible with the ability of JavaScript to manipulate the DOM elements on the existing page. Number 19. Explain decorators in Angular. Decorators are the design patterns or functions that explain and define how an Angular feature works. They get used to making the last modification to service, class, filter, etc. We have 4 types of decorators in Angular, and they are as follow: parameter decorators, property decorators, class decorators, method decorators. Number 20. Explain server-side rendering in Angular. Well, when we talk about the typical Angular applications, browsers execute the application and JavaScript handles every user interaction. But because of this, let's say we sometimes have an extensive application with a big build size. The page's loading speed will be slowed down a bit as it needs to download files, parse JavaScript, and then execute it at the end. This is a considerable burden on the resources. To negate this problem of slowness, server-side rendering comes in handy. It allows to send the fully rendered page from the server and the browsers can display it. And then it lets the JavaScript code take over and handle any interaction from the user. Number 21. What are services in Angular? Services in Angular perform the tasks that get used by the multiple components. There are different tasks such as image fetching, database management, network connection, etc. Services in Angular perform all the operational tasks for components and avoid rewriting of code. We can write the service once and inject it into all the services components. Number 22. How to create a service in Angular. A service is an object in Angular that can be substituted. It is combined and wired with the help of operating system dependency injection. They are developed by getting registered in a module that must be executed. There are 3 methods of creating service in Angular: service, factory, provider. Number 23. What do you mean by pipes in Angular and how do they work? Pipes are functions designed to accept the input, process it, and then returns the output to the given input. In other words, we can also say a transformed value. In Angular, we have support available for several built-in pipes, and we can also have customized pipes as per our need and requirements. Some of the critical features of pipes are as follow. They are defined using the special symbol assigned specifically for the pipes. We can chain the pipe with other pipes. We can provide pipes with arguments by using the colon sign. Number 24. What do you mean by scope in Angular? Well, it is an object in Angular and refers to the application model. It is a context for the execution of the defined expressions. Scopes are organized in a hierarchy similar to the application's DOM structure. And scope helps to propagate various events and expressions. Number 25. What do you mean by pure and impure pipes in Angular? Pure pipes are those pipes that use pure functions, and as a result, pure pipe does not have any internal state. And as a result, the output remains the same until and unless the passed parameters remain same. Angular calls and uses the pipes only when it detects some change in the passed parameters. Angular uses a single instance of pure pipe throughout all the components. If we talk about the impure pipes, for all the change detection in Angular, an impure pipe gets called irrespective of the change in the input fields. Multiple pipe instance gets created for these pipes. By default, every pipe is a pure, and we can specify the impure pipes using the pure property. Here is the code snippet in case if you want to see, and here we have pure as true or false. In case if it is true, it means the pipe is true. If the value is false, the pipe will be false. or impure. Number 26. What is Angular CLI? Angular CLI is also known as the command line interface. Angular supports the CLI and allows the professional to use it for adding different components, testing them, and deploying them instantly. Other than that, CLI offers many more functions as well. Number 27. What is the difference between Angular and jQuery? One of the most significant difference between Angular and jQuery is Angular is a front-end framework of JavaScript and jQuery is a library of JavaScript. Some of the other differences are as follows. Angular possesses two-way data binding, but jQuery does not have data binding. Angular gives the support for the RESTful API and jQuery does not. We do not have any form validation in jQuery, but in Angular, we have it available. jQuery also does not offer the deep linking routing, but Angular supports this functionality. Despite it, there are some similarities as well. For example, both of them feature DOM manipulation and other animation support. Number 28. What is an Angular router? Well, it is a single-page front-end application and its task is to respond to the change in URL made by removing and adding different content from the application. This task is a bit complicated as we initially need to intercept requests that change the browser's URL as we do not want the browser to reload. After that, we must determine which content to add and which to remove. In the end, we have to change the URL so we can show the user the current page they are on. So as this process is complicated to implement, especially for multiple applications, so Angular comes with a complete routing solution for single-page applications. Number 29. Explain promises and observables in Angular. Both of these concepts deal with the asynchronous event in Angular. Promises handle one event at once, while the observable handles a sequence of events over time. Promises emit a single value at a time and they execute immediately after the creation, and we cannot cancel them. They also push errors to the child's promises. On the other hand, observables get only executed when they are subscribed using the method subscribe. Unlike promises, they emit multiple values over time. Observables deliver the error to the subscribers, and when the unsubscribe method is called, the subscriber or listener stops getting the other values. Observable also helps perform different operations like lines, filters, retry, etc. Number 30. What's the difference between lazy and eager loading? With lazy loading, it dynamically loads the features and modules when needed. This results in application becoming faster. We use this for the huge application where we do not require all the modules at the start of the application. Eager loading is also known as the default module loading strategy. Under the eager loading, modules are loaded before the application starts. This usually gets used for the smaller applications. Number 31. What type does DOM gets implemented in Angular? DOM, which stands for Document Object Model, treats HTML or XML documents as a tree structure in which each node is an object that represents a part of document. In Angular, regular DOM gets used and it updates the whole tree structure of the HTML tags until and unless it reaches the data that is to be updated. And in order to maintain the performance and ensure the speed is not affected, Angular uses change detection. Number 32. What do you mean by NgModule? NgModules are containers in Angular and they reserve a block of code for a workflow or an application. It takes the metadata object which generally describes how to compile a component's template to generate an injector at runtime. It also identifies the components of the module, its directives, pipes, etc. It also makes some of this public so that the external components can use them. Number 33. Explain different type of compiler that get used in Angular. In Angular, we have two compilers, JIT and AOT. JIT stands for just in time and AOT stands for ahead of time. You might have heard about JIT. Well, both these compilers are different from each other and they are used for different purposes as well. JIT gets used for compiling the TypeScript to JavaScript as the browsers cannot understand TypeScript directly, but the browser can understand the JavaScript. We do this compilation in a development environment. For example, let's say when we want to spend less time on the compilation and more on the development side, AOT compiler gets used to create the minified production build for the entire code base, and then it can be used in the production. To use the AOT compiler, we must use the ngbuild command. This drives the Angular CLI to create the optimized production code-based build. It takes more time as many optimization take time. Number 34. Explain some of the advantages of AOT. Well, some of the significant advantages of AOT are as follow. AOT offers fast rendering after the compilation, and the browsers download a pre-compiled version of our application. It can render the application very immediately without compiling the whole app. AOT makes sure that it uses the small memory for download as the compiler will minify the code. And eventually, the download size will be less and more negligible. AOT helps in template error detection. During the compilation phase, any issues in the template are detected and reported so that they can be corrected before we move towards the production phase. AOT also makes sure that we have fewer asynchronous requests. It takes the external HTML and CSS style sheet and aligns it with JavaScript application, reducing the number of separate AJAX requests. Number 35. What do you mean by Angular Universal? Angular Universal is a package in Angular that enables the server-side rendering in applications based on Angular. Applications can be made ready for server-side rendering using Angular CLI. To do this, we use the following command as ngadd at nguniversal/express engine. This will allow the Angular application to work well with the Express.js web server that also compiles the HTML pages with Angular Universal based on the request by the client. This also creates the app module on the server side. Number 36. Name some of the components of Angular and explain their working. Components are the basic building blocks of the user interface in Angular. A component consists of HTML, JavaScript, and CSS for the specific portion of any user interface. We can take them as custom HTML elements that Angular can only understand. All those components are isolated, which means the code from one component cannot and will not affect the code of another component. In the end, all of these components are put together with the help of Angular to build and make a user interface, and in the end, the browser renders it. Number 37. What is dependency injection? Dependency injection is a software design pattern in Angular. In this, the object can be passed in the form of dependencies instead of having them as hard-coded in respective components. This is extremely handy when it comes to separating object logic creation from the consumption of it. Number 38. Differentiate Angular and Backbone.js. Regarding architecture, Angular works on MVC architecture and it uses the two-way data binding to drive the application's activity. On the other hand, Backbone.js uses the MVP architecture and it does not offer any process for the data binding. In terms of community support, Angular is backed by Google, which increases its community support. Backbone.js also has excellent community support available, but it only has documents on the _JS template and not much else. If I talk about in data critical perspective, Angular possesses a two-way data binding process, which is a complex one. On the contrary, Backbone.js do not have any data binding process, and because of that, it has a simplistic API. In the end, let's talk about the performance. Because of two-way data binding, Angular offers better performance for both small and large projects. And Backbone.js has the upper hand in terms of performance when we talk about small projects, but it is not recommended to go for large projects with Backbone.js. Number 39. Explain the digest cycle process in Angular. It is a process in Angular, and in that a watch list gets monitored to keep track of the changes in the watch variable value. In every digest cycle, there is a comparison between the previous and present version of the scope model values. Number 40. How can you explain the differences between Angular expressions and JavaScript expressions? Well, both type of expressions can have literals, variables, and operators. We have some dissimilarities between them as well, and some of them are as follows. JavaScript expressions does not support the filters, while Angular expressions support it. The Angular expression does not support the conditional, loops, and exceptions, but JavaScript's expressions supports this. It is possible that we can write the Angular expression inside the HTML tags, but it is not the case with JavaScript expressions, as they cannot be written inside the HTML tag. Number 41. What do you know about RxJS? Well, it is a library in Angular. The term itself stands for reactive extensions for JavaScript. It gets used so that we use the observables in our JavaScript projects, and it also helps us to perform reactive programming. RxJS gets used in the several frameworks, including Angular is one of them. Number 42. What is Angular Material? Angular Material is a UI component library. It helps in creating attractive, fully functional, and consistent web pages as well as web application. It does all these things while following a modern principle for web design, and it also includes the browser's graceful degradation and portability. Number 43. What is common between service and factory functions? Service functions get used by the business layer of the application. It operates as a constructor function. The function is invoked at runtime by using the keyword new. Factory also works almost in the same way as the service function, but the service function is more powerful and flexible. In reality, the factory functions are design patterns that helps create the objects. Number 44. What do you mean by the view encapsulation, and what explains the ways we can follow to do it in Angular? View encapsulation determines if the style that is defined in the particular component is going to affect the entire application or not. In Angular, we have three ways or types of view encapsulation. First one is none. These type of styles are defined in the component and they are visible to the components of application. Then comes native. In this type, the styles used in other HTML are not separate to the component. Then comes emulated. This style used in other HTML spreads to the whole components. Number 45. Explain authentication and authorization in Angular. Well, the user credentials get passed to the Authenticate API and it presents on the server. After that, a post server-side validation of credential gets returned. Basically, it is a JSON web token. This JSON web token has the information regarding the user. Then, this user gets identified with the given JWT. This process is known as authentication. After logging in successfully, different users have a different level of access to the system. For example, admins generally have more system access than regular users. To ensure that only the admin has all the access and the normal users has limited access to the system's feature is known as authorization. Number 46. What advantages does Angular have over other frameworks? In Angular, many built-in features like state management, routing, and HTTP services are straight out of the box. It means we do not have to look for earlier stated features separately. As Angular uses HTML to render the UI of applications, and as it is a declarative language, it is much easier to use than JavaScript. Google has plans to prolong the support for Angular and further scale up its ecosystem, so it ensures that Angular has long-term support available. Number 47. Explain MVVM architecture. MVVM architecture has three parts as model, view model. This architectural style removes the tight coupling among the components and allows the children to have the reference through the observable and not directly to the parents. Now let's talk about them in detail. Model. Well, this part represents any application's data and the central business logic. In other words, it contains the main structure of an entity. It contains business logic, local and remove data sources, models, classes, repositories, etc. View. It is a visual layer of the application and consists of the user interface. It sends the action taken by the user to the view model, but it does not get the response back from the view model. To get the response, it has to subscribe to observables. At last, let's talk about view model. Well, this part acts as an abstract layer of an application and as a bridge between the model and view. View and view model are connected with data binding. Any change in the view forces the view model to change the data inside the model. It also interacts with the model and it exposes observables that the view can observe. Number 48. What are different types of Angular directives? We have three kinds of directives in Angular. First one is structural. This type of directive changes the structure of a view. Let's say we want to hide or show some data based on some property, or if you want to add the list of data in markup. So these type of things are done using structural directives. Then comes the component. A component is the most straightforward directive with a template. It gets used to define a single piece of the user interface by using the TypeScript code, HTML template, and CSS style. At the end, we have attribute. This type of directive changes the behavior or appearance of any components, elements, or other directives. This gets used as an attribute of the system. Number 49. What do you mean by HTTP interceptors in Angular? HTTP interceptors are an essential part of @Angular/common/HTTP module and are used for inspecting and transforming HTTP requests and responses. Interceptors gets created to perform different checks on the request, manipulate response, and perform cross-cutting concerns like logging requests, authentication of users using the requests, compressing the responses using the gzip, etc. Number 50. What do you mean by multicasting in Angular? When we use the HTTP client module to communicate with the backend service and to fetch some data, after we are done fetching the data, we can publish or broadcast it to multiple subscribers with a single execution. This broadcast of data with multiple subscribers is called multicasting. To use multicasting, we have to use the RxJS subject. And that was all about the 50 questions that you must consider for your next Angular interview. I hope now that you must have liked watching this video. If that is the case, please leave a like, subscribe and press the bell icon. We'll get back to you in the next video. Till then, take care.